I bought this faulty PlayStation 5 for £146.72. The best part is, it came with a little note. Hi YouTube, smiley face. Hi again Joey. Oh no, what have I done? You bought from me in the past a Switch Lite Season 1 Episode 39. Well, I definitely didn't have much hair then, and this is a great frame shot. Please be nice to my soldering skills. The port works as you get signal to the TV. Since watching your vids, I've now been able to fix HDMI ports, switch, charging ports, etc. Your vids have been a godsend. Cheers. From Scott. Well, what an absolute legend. And Scott, like I said, I hope I can make you proud today. Let's go ahead and enter our cost for this PS5 on Sally's Spectacular spreadsheet for episode number 35 and crack on. Scott did also mention in the letter that there is a lack of screws, which would probably explain why the M.2 cover is not secured in place down here. Now, supposedly, it's a beep on, beep off. So let's get that tested. Plugging it in, does it beep on and off? Okay, turns on, fan spin. Turns off pretty much straight away. I think, judging by the letter and the eBay listing, the only thing Scott's done is change the HDMI port, and now it's a beep on, beep off. So it'll be interesting to take a look under the hood. Would help if I had the right screw bit. This screw here is actually for the back casing, not this front one. And the reason you can tell is because it's got a little spike at the end of it. The screws that go in this side of the casing, they're flat-ended. So you've got the flat end at the bottom there, whereas the one that goes in the back has this little point at the end. As you can see, just there. The more you know. How's the first looks of this absolute beast? Yeah, nice. Seems to be all right. Antennas all okay. There's even a little bit of what looks to be tape just around there to keep them together. In a lot of scenarios, these antenna cables can get stuck in places that they shouldn't, even when they're plugged into the board. Then what happens is you get some techs, maybe with a little bit lesser experience, that would go ahead and put a screw in and it will go right through the antenna cable, which obviously is not an ideal situation. Do seem to be missing quite a few silver screws as well. What I will say is, whilst pointing all of this out, please don't let it come across as patronizing. The more information I share with you guys, for example with Scott, is a great opportunity to effectively learn some more little small hints and tips. Okay, under this part of the hood now, we're looking okay. I can see, obviously, we have some stuff with the HDMI port to just show that it's previously been worked on, and we can tell that with some of the leftover flux marks and just the shinier solder blobs because it's leaded solder instead of the unleaded. So let's just grab these screws out, and this is the clamp that secures that liquid metal between the APU and the heatsink for an effective cooling solution. This front connector out. Now there's two ways I could effectively look to troubleshoot this. The first way is, because it's a beep on beep off, I could use UART, which, putting it simply, will tell me what the issue is some of the time. I'd probably say like a 50-50 chance. UART is very good for a beep on beep off scenario. However, there's also nothing wrong with just having a bit of a look over the board, and I'm going to go with that option. The reason being, it's had previous work done to it. So I need to inspect that technician's previous work to just ensure there's nothing like a little solder bridge that is causing this console to not turn on. UART wouldn't confirm that there's a solder bridge in this area. It's more so going to report to me that we have an issue with a certain component, which might not be the case if a previous tech's worked on it, but I could be utterly, completely wrong. I think it's very important to take a fresh kind of stance on this and just take a look at the work that's been done on it already. Now, straight off the bat, I can see a couple of things. I don't know if you can really see it via this angle. This is the heatsink for where the APU sits, and this is the APU. The liquid metal that we have on here is just not suffice. We have severe dry spots. Essentially, this tiny little bit on the APU here, this corner, and this part here looks like the only bits that we're getting cooled. What could happen in this scenario is, if you don't have enough liquid metal and the APU isn't getting sufficient enough cooling, it could blow. It could go bang, caused by overheating, and it's GG, effectively. But again, I'm not going to write that off straight away, but just food for thought. So this is what I mean. Look, you can effectively see this wasn't spread out enough, and it has just caused a dry spot on the APU. Before I get into that and give it a nice cleanup, I've just noticed another thing. Remember what I said about the screw on the back of the console? This is the heatsink, and it's loose. It's really, really loose. It's not even screwed down. So there is actually now a high chance that this APU has actually overheated, is what I'm thinking. It looks like there just wasn't enough of a sandwich to transfer the heat between the board and the heatsink itself. So I'm a little bit worried. Let me sort out this liquid metal on the APU, and then we're going to inspect the PCB a little bit further. Speaking of PCBs, a quick word from today's video sponsor, PCB Way. PCBWay is your website for DIY. Get an instant quote on your PCBs at a low cost with fast delivery. New customers will also get a $5 welcome bonus. Fully customize your PCB with a few clicks, including the thickness of the board to the color of the solder mask. PCBWay also offers services in CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication, and also injection molding. Head on over to the gift store and grab yourself a multimeter or a soldering iron. PCBWay has it all. Thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring today's video. Now back to the repair. So this is also the before sort of money shot. What I'm going to do is gather up all of that liquid metal as much as I possibly can using isopropyl alcohol and my cotton swab. And I'm just going to push it all into the middle of the die. Get as much of it as I can. It also wouldn't massively surprise me if we had any liquid metal on the board that was causing an area to short out, which is why we have a beep on beep off. So I will look for any liquid metal that is potentially spilled over as well. And I'm just giving the actual die itself a little scrub. I'd also be a fool to not inspect the die now under the scope, just to check for any cracks on any of the corners. No, it looks really clean now that I've given it a nice scrub. That does look really, really clean. There's no cracks. Specifically, like I said, I'm looking in the four corners. So I'm looking over here, I'm looking down here, I'm looking over there, and up here as well. But that looks all right. And whilst I'm here, I'm just going to spread it. Just like this. And it's going to look a lot better than what it did, that's for sure. There we go. That's nice and covered now. We'll do the exact same for the heatsink. And I'm not going to lie to you, what I think's happened here, I think there's a bit too much liquid metal, which is what's caused it to kind of just squish out. The fact that the areas are dirty as well certainly didn't help, but I do think there's a bit too much liquid metal here. Quite a bit too much, actually. So I'm going to soak this up with what do you call it, a sponger? I don't know what it's called, but this thing. So just soak that up. I think it's plunger. Could be wrong. Get rid of this liquid metal on here. And now I'm going to give this a good scrub with some IPA. And then just put a little blob on. Nothing too big because we've got quite a bit on the APU itself. Remember, this is just the heatsink. Oh, but Joey, how do you know that this might be causing the issue? I've done it before. I have sold a PS5 on eBay as faulty because I couldn't get it to work. And the person messaged me saying, Joey, you just didn't put the screws in for the heatsink, so it wasn't making a good enough contact, and the PS5 now runs absolutely fine. So I've been there, I've done this. Learn from your mistakes. Saying that, again, this might not be the reason why this doesn't work. Before I actually test this, I'm just going to divert my attention here underneath the microscope to see what the situation is with the HDMI port. How are we looking? Okay, that's what I'm going to give this. I'm going to give this an okay. There's a couple things that I immediately spot. One is that it's a little bit of an angle, which doesn't necessarily matter too much. Don't forget, this is microscopic, so even though it really looks like it here, to the human eye, you wouldn't really notice it at all. And as long as they're making a connection on the pads, it's not a problem. The legs are where we're going to have a little bit of an issue because there is no solder flowing up these legs at all. You see that? Nothing. So this port is not going to be too strong, in my opinion, even if it's soldered down here, which is probably more of a risk, because if this takes any brute force at all, what will happen is it's just going to rip the pads. So I'd like to see a little bit more solder up the legs of the port, if I'm honest with you. Both sides, that is. We do have some solder mask here, which has been stripped away, and it's now showing the copper, which is why this is solder, because it's adhered to the copper underneath the solder mask. And if I just quickly look at the back under the scope, could just do with a little clean. And we can see here, these little blobs of solder haven't flowed properly. You can just tell. I don't know how to describe it. Just it's a weird looking object, right? It's a weird looking shape is the term I'll use. If these three were looking like this one here in the top left, on the surface of it, it wouldn't look as bad. So what I am going to do is probably replace this port anyway. However, I do want to check and see if it is solid. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, these pins are soldered to the board. Can you see that? They're not moving. So what Scott was saying in his letter is probably 100% true, that he was getting some signal and he was able to see the picture, etc. But we can make this port better. And I'd say better, more Joey-fied, right? So my way of doing things, which isn't necessarily the right way. It's just different. So let's get this port off. First, we tin the port. Truth be told, guys, I've not actually soldered in a little while. Just been super busy with some family bits, so I don't know how this is going to go. It might be absolutely horrendous. Just get a little bit more flux on there. There we go. Now, I don't personally think this is going to take me a very long time to get this port off the board. So I've got max temperature here and maximum airflow. So 480 degrees Celsius at 99%. I'm just going to hold the port because, like I said, I think it is just going to fall out. Here it goes. Now, I don't think Scott solder is the problem here. So what I'm going to do is just add some leaded and fill up these holes. There we go. I'm just going to give it a nice little clean. Look at that. See, with just a little bit of a clean, you can look so much better. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work any better than what it did. It certainly looks the part. Scrape this little bit off as well. There we go. Nice. And if we turn it over, this is how we look. So what I'm going to do is dump some heat into the board. And the reason I do this is to make my life easier. Solder loves heat. So if you let something cool down enough, and I come back in with my soldering iron right now, it's going to be a lot more difficult than if the board was scorching. Now I come in with the flux. I'm just going to tidy these holes up again on this side. As much as I can. Because the copper's missing from here as well. So I'm just going to put a bunch of solder there. And then I'm going to go over here. Just like that. Perfect. All tinned, ready to go. Come back in with a cotton swab. And get rid of all that muck. And there we have it. Still not looking beautiful. But again, a little bit better than what it was. Now I come in with some more flux. There it is. And now I'm going to heat the board from underneath. Same temperatures. 480 degrees Celsius, 99% airflow. Heating from underneath the board, and I'm going to drop the port onto the board. Here we go. Remember as well, this is the one that I've tinned already. There we go. All of that solder is now glistening. So I'll come in, stick the port on, move the heat around, not keep the heat stagnant. Because if I keep the heat stagnant, knowing my luck, I'll most likely burn something. We don't want to burn anything. So I'm just going to tap the port around, wiggle it a bit. Sit it down nicely with the pads behind it, if I can. Just like that. Keep the heat on. Try and get that solder to flow up the legs of the port. And the reason why that's quite tricky is because the port is going to be cold. And when the port is cold and I've put it on this boiling solder, it's not going to adhere to the port. And now I'm going to come off. And I'm going to keep holding until I see that solder solidify, which comes with a little bit of experience. But I'll tell you when. It's now. So I'll now come off, move the board back, and very importantly, give it a nice clean. Just a cotton swab, because if we move quick enough, this is all hot, nice and hot, which means that flux is very easy to clean. Because again, when you're soldering, heat is good. Hot air work, whatever it is you're doing, heat is very, very good. Now, the funny thing is with this, I still don't know if this works. That's the big cliffhanger here, right? I don't know if this PS5 works. I've got no idea. I'm just assuming that the APU is actually okay, and I'm just pretty much winging it. What I probably should have done is tested to make sure that it turns on before I start messing around with the port. But it is what it is. Now that looks nice. I like it a lot. And those pins are all going to be absolutely solid. Just to show you that they are. I mean, I won't go over every single one, but if I just try and nudge a few, they're all going to be fine. And again, that comes with more so just experience to know that they are all solid. Now, look at the right side of the port. You see that solder going up the leg? Lovely, jubbly. Left side's going to be a little bit iffy, again, because it's scraped away some of the copper, but there is plenty enough solder in there to help with the port. And if we look at the back, that's nice. Do you know what? I don't even need to do. I'm not going to mess around with those blobs. I'm going to leave them. Usually what I do is I come in and maybe make them look a little bit nicer just for aesthetics purposes. But do you know what? They are absolutely fine. They might be a tiny bit too big, but it is what it is. It will do the job. It looked good enough to me. To my standard. Well, I'll screw it back in quickly. Make sure that the heatsink has that good enough contact, and we'll see if it actually powers on. And then if it does power on, see if we get an image. Luckily, I have an abundance of screws for PS5s because I've messed up that many. So the first one should go in down here, and then the other one should go in here. I'm actually going to hold it up to make my life a bit easier. Okay, so that feels and isn't coming out now. That feels 10 times better. This bit doesn't feel like it's been sat in properly. Having an absolute nightmare trying to put this back in. I don't know why, honestly. Right, there we go. Right, let's get the board in. Get the heatsink clamp on. Right, let's just see what happens if it beeps on, beeps off, like whatever it does. Let's plug it in. I mean, if it does work, I'll be very, very shocked, but here we are. 3, 2, 1. Wow, it was just overheating. No. I can't believe it. It was nothing to do with the HDMI port, by the way. Nothing to do with that. Because the HDMI port, there was nothing shorting out that would cause it to beep on, beep off, and it's on, look. It's a white light. I don't believe it. I don't Adam and Eve it. Just make sure I get an image quick before I turn it off. It was quite literally those couple of screws that were just not put back in the correct place then. Yep, I get a display. Wow, I can't wait to see the profit that we make with this, to be honest. So I turned the console on, I installed Call of Duty and Fortnite, neither of which, by the way, I'm any good at in any way, shape or form. However, played a game of Warzone just to make sure, give it a nice stress test to make sure it performs okay under a load, and it seemed to be absolutely fine. I can now consider this fixed. Let's head on over to Sally's spectacular spreadsheet to work out the profit. I'm going to update the two Xbox One S consoles that I have. I spent £30 on a 1TB SSD for this Xbox One S. I naively thought I was going to get £85 for that console. Do you know how much I got? £67.68. £6.99 for postage. I fixed an Xbox One S. I put a 1TB SSD in and I lost £6. This one, by the way, a 500 gig hard drive, sold for £62.68. So I made a nice profit of £28.69. So if anything, please do not buy additional drives, SSDs specifically, for Xbox One S consoles that you're going to fix, because they won't sell. We won't make any more money than what you would put in a 500 gig hard disk drive or a 1TB drive in. Anyways, here's my PS5 digital, £146.72. I have just hidden a bunch of columns that don't really need to be known. Hopefully this is a little bit easier on your eyes rather than not knowing where to look. I'm trying to simplify it a little bit. I have a string of stuff up here, but it's all hidden. That includes eBay fees, postage, and a bunch of other things. Parts, £1 for the HDMI port. Now, as a guess, I think I'm going to be able to get £230 for this PS5 digital edition. So if I type 230, that should give us a rough profit of £61.58. So for today, our estimated profit is £61.58. I don't know what the actual profit is yet, and I'd say it's about an hour's worth of work, which will eventually update the hourly profit once it actually sells. Current scores on the doors then, £1,566.94 actual profit out of a target of £2,000. We're slowly getting there, to be honest, and the actual is way above the estimated. If you've got nothing to do, come chill with me over in this video right here. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.